Proportional Response. Book 1. Chapter 15, Part 12. Judo of Words. Talil growled quietly for a moment, but cut off suddenly when he realized his microphone was hot. He shot a glare at Jalat, which she returned with a mockingly beneficent smile. He slowly, deliberately, undocked his platform and floated up, at the platform's minimum possible speed, to join her. She raised an eyebrow at his slow progress, and her nostrils pulsed once in annoyance. Wait, no. Enibel thought, that is not a tell for annoyance, that is surprise, and I don't remember what. I am not sure this is even a tell. I learned from their briefings, so how do I know this? Talil is going off script. That damned lizard thought he would just follow her directives and do as she said. I will have to speak with him privately and find out what she offered or threatened, and why he is doing what he chooses anyway. I mean, it could just be because he is a cat and that is what happens. But Jalat tired of Talil's slow progress and cut her own mic back on. While you make your way to a point, Tal, I will remind you that there is a prescription in place today against any form of threats. I will also ask you to keep your remarks germane to the subject at hand, not to recriminations about recent affairs which should hold little bearing on these proceedings. More angry mutters, some about how her comment seemed to be a form of threat, circulated through the council chamber. Jalat affected an air of unconcern. Once Talil made it to his intended height, he stopped, and had to wait for several seconds before Jalat turned his microphone back on. The Kismar nation stands behind humanity, firmly. Notice what I do not say. Not that we stand behind them in this, but that we stand behind them fully, and name them as allies to all well-meaning, sapient life. All of you should consider what that means. For my proud and independent species to speak so highly of anyone. There is, of course, much more I could say, but I must confess confusion at Jalat's admonition about germane topics, considering how far afield my fellow ambassadors were allowed to travel in criticizing humanity. Therefore, I must conclude that her prescription is against anything that would show the truth of humanity and how they have dealt with all of us, rather than the half-truths and distortions that have been presented so far. He saw Jalat reaching out to cut his mic. He pointed to her, and there is your proof. I believe that it makes my point. His microphone cut off abruptly, and she glared murder at him. Yes, he definitely had a script, and didn't stick to it. Good for you, Talil. Just make sure you watch your back. Enibel considered the number of humans, most of them women, oddly, who had been chosen to join the Ruxa, and decided Talil was probably safe. Jalat hit a button on her console, and Talil's platform began to float back to its place. The Ruxa shouted and gestured meaningfully. Another mutter through the council hall marked the fact that many had seen and understood. Only the Prime Minister should have the controls to do that. Jalat attempted to stare the mutters down, but met with no success. Enibel looked around the chamber again. The fact that some, maybe even enough, ambassadors appeared swayed still bothering him. Many of those ambassadors' worlds received the tainted seed stock, and now they are ready to feed humanity to the Exaltans. After what they did, do they actually believe the tripe that the Exaltans have spouted about humanity infecting the grain on purpose? He took another look around and noticed that many of the greedy-seeming ambassadors seemed awfully uncomfortable. Threatened. Jalat threatened them, and they are afraid. No, that isn't it, or not all of it. Exaltan threats don't mean what they used to. Understanding hit Enibel so hard, he felt the air rush out of his lungs. Bribes! Jalat has flat out bribed them. Probably intimidated them too, but she could easily pay out a great deal in the way of bribes for this. Via effrontery, he wanted to stand and denounce Jalat, but knew he couldn't prove anything. He fought his fury as Jalat finally gave up her attempt to stare everyone down. She spoke again in tones of clear annoyance bordering on a threat. Is there anyone else who has anything germane to add to this discussion? I warn you now that I will brook no impudence, nor attempting to whitewash the sins of the humans. She looked down at her console. Well, I see that there are a few of you who feel you have something to add. I, however, can surely almost quote the sort of mealy-mouthed attempts to apologize for the humans that you intend to do, and I simply won't have it. We will. Enibel couldn't take any more. He looked down at Henry, who surprised him by giving a single nod, and a hand motion that seemed to ask, "What the hell are you waiting for?" He leaned forward to hit the button, deciding that the plan could go to hell. To his great surprise, the Duke beat him to it, and Jalad stopped speaking when the light came on her display. She raised her eyes to stare a threat at Enable, and let them glow a tiny bit of red for a moment. He felt his insides go to water, and hated to think of the fact that he would have considered fleeing the platform a couple of years ago nearly as much as he hated the fact that he staunchly stood. Or sat, held. Maybe held his ground now. The Duke, however, stepped between them and stared down. He didn't need to see the man's face to know the sort of contempt he placed in that look. He is the direct voice of a head of state from a founding nation. She can't deny him the right to speak, and she knows it. If she tries, he can invalidate the vote entirely. She lifted one side of her lips in a threat, but made no comment. She simply hid her controls and turned on Kasler's microphone. The Duke spoke without preamble. "Humanity will be allowed to speak in its defense now, or I will use one of the Venter head of state overrides to shut this session down." Jalad took in a deep breath and moved to cut the mics over, but Kasler waggled a finger at her in admonition. "No, Ambassador, I did not say after you prattle on and try to lay further limits on what humanity's ambassador is, or isn't allowed to say. I said now. The fact that you, rather than the Prime Minister, are controlling the microphones is out of order, but I will not go into that at this juncture. You forget that I have controls of my own on this platform, and if you don't cut microphone control directly from me to Ambassador Henry Archer, I am going to use them to shut this session down and send everyone away." Jalad gave him an imperious look, then flicked her wrist at the controls, cutting the microphone over as if she didn't care, and thought Kasler foolish for spending an intercession. Henry didn't try to undock his platform, which surprised Enable. He'd have thought his friend would do so just to tweak Jalad's snout. When his voice came out, it was faint and hard to hear. "That damned bitch." She turned down the gain on his mic. She moved as if to cut him off, probably intending to say something about him being unwilling or unable to speak intelligibly. However, Henry simply raised his voice so loud that half the council could probably hear him without the amplification, and the small amplification provided carried his voice to everyone else. "It seems that the overlords of the League, and yes, humanity is done pretending that they have ever seen themselves, or behaved as anything else, are determined to keep me from using the proper faculties and courtesies, guaranteed of all. Ambassadors, my platform will not undock, and there is a message, quite illegally I might add, on my screen informing me." Jalad moved to cut off Henry's mic, but Kasler raised his hand in an obviously similar threat, and she subsided with a growl. "No, let me restate that. It does not inform me. The message threatens death if I mention that my platform controls do not respond. That said, I will endeavor to keep my remarks brief. We have all been beholden to watch this parade of nonsense for far too long." A few angry mutters floated through the council, and Inbile felt his eyes widen. He looked over at Kasler, who gave him a dark look and nodded. Enable had to swallow his own bile as he realized what he was witnessing. War. The humans are ready, and it seems the Zoltans think they are too. Neither side is trying to delay any more, just to get everyone to choose up sides. And Jalad thinks she has everyone scared off. A look around the chamber put lie to that idea for anyone who had the ability to read the various beings present. Henry continued, "Humanity has already declared freely that we have taken possession of these worlds. Much has been said about humanity secretly taking possession of these worlds and building colonies without any of your knowledge. However, I ask you to consider something. Given the obvious and overt prejudice displayed towards my species in these chambers today, what else could we have done? If we'd announced that we were taking these worlds which no one wanted or had any intention to lay claim to, what would have happened? How likely do you think it would have been that we would have been threatened with sanctions, or, worse, violence? Leads. If that had happened, we would not, now, have strong, capable, independent colonies on all of the worlds in question. Colonies which, I might add, we were able to develop without requesting aid from anyone." Ebel marveled at how Henry could make it clear just what he meant when he suggested that the Zoltan might request something. He brought his mind back to focus as his brother continued. If we had announced ourselves, then you would all miss out on the trade those colonies have to offer. Many of those colonies have been gearing up to specialize in certain trade goods, mostly ones that we know are favored by their closest neighbors. Henry hit a few buttons on his console. When did he get an upgrade to a holo console? Furthermore, how? With the way the Zoltans had been interfering. Here is a list of the goods each world is prepared to offer, along with price breakdowns for our favored trading partners. Henry made an expansive gesture. That is, of course, all of you, except for those who have cheated humanity in the past. He gave the Kothro ambassador a hard stare. Or those who still owe us reparations for out-of-bounds military action.